I remember everybody telling me at that time that I couldn't, I can't, I shouldn't. I virtually said, hell no. That little cocky person of 16 came out. No. I knew what it took to be a gymnast. I knew what it took. Great faith, great mindset, a determination. And I knew I was fighting for my life and for movement.
How do you transform problems into power? Meet Sharon. A devastating fall left doctors saying she'd never move the same again. But she chose to embrace a 3-step process: realize, analyze, and execute. That choice led her to become a thriving master Pilates instructor, movement specialist, and mom of 5, proving your greatest setback can become your greatest strength.
The year was 1974, going to the gym because I was preparing for gymnastics states finals, and we were sharing this big field house with a wrestling team. Little did I know that one of the wrestlers had pulled the mats away from the end of my beam, uncovering the big bars that lay on the floor, which are the feet or the beam. I was getting ready to dismount again. I remember the flight, knowing that I was going to miss the beam. I fell directly on that open, exposed leg of the beam. And for some reason, I passed out, because the next moment I woke up, something was very wrong. I didn't really know where I was, and the only faces I could see were these 2 EMTs looking over me. Couldn't move my feet, couldn't move my legs. Went to the hospital. I knew I had x-rays, but they must have filled me with some kind of pain relief for a number of days. But when I woke up about 4 days later, and I was pretty coherent, in comes this man, and he was a neurologist, and he came in, he sat down, he said, "This is our prognosis. You've ruptured this, this, and this. You've herniated this and this, and this is gonna limit you, Sharon. You need to understand this is a very serious back injury. You could possibly experience paralysis. You could be in a wheelchair. Probably will have all kinds of problems. You'll probably have surgery after surgery." But you know, as science goes on, he kept talking and talking. I do remember crying for about 30 minutes. And then all I said, it did not take me long to realize that this man was wrong.
Realizing what is best for you is key. Others will talk and attempt to influence your life. They may even be experts. But isn't it time that you give the expert status to only 2 people, God and yourself?
I remember my parents coming in, my mom being so upset. I remember everybody telling me at that time that I couldn't, I can't, I shouldn't, I couldn't, I wouldn't, and it was at that time I virtually said, hell no. That little cocky person of 16 came out. No. I knew what it took. It took great faith, it took great mindset, it took a determination. And I knew I was fighting for my life and for movement and to be a full-blown girl again. And so from that point on, I would not listen to medicine. And I know that sounds bad because my daughter is a great surgeon. And I believe that medicine is important. But when somebody tells me I can't, I'm going to tell me I can.
Analyze. After you've looked at where your life is, or the circumstances are forcing a verdict on you, this is where you decide that you are changing the script. You develop your plan for a new outcome. Many use God's help, others determine alone. But one thing is sure, you captain your own ship.
What was behind me? And I was determined not to be in a wheelchair. The system that I developed involved a lot of the performance elements of gymnastics, because we would breathe, we would do certain kinds of breathing on certain movements within the beam or on the beam or flipping on and off. And I kind of developed that same kind of system of rehabbing step by step. I developed a breathing system. I developed a core system. I realized that what I did here made a huge difference in the area you couldn't see in the mirror. And at that time, when I was about 18 or 19, I had gone to a bookstore. I found this book that was called Return to Life by Joseph Pilates. And I discovered that some of the things that I had developed myself were quite similar to what he was doing, but he had developed a repertoire, developed a wonderful business from it. And that's kind of where I started my journey in Pilates. Pilates is spine health and core development, and it will change your life.
Execute. This is the most essential part of the life process. You now move forward on what you've developed by deciding to put feet to the process. It requires diligence, consistency, and grit to never revert to being average again. This is the place called exceptional, and only you can decide to be that.
So I went forward, and for 30 years, I married, I had children, I experienced 4 pregnancies. I did have bouts of pain. That doctor was right about that. I had a few falls over that 30-year span. I love the fact that I could figure out what I could do that day to make my body better. I would set a plan. I just wouldn't talk about it. I would do. From that time on, no matter what stage of life I was, pregnancy, recovering from a C-section, a fall, but I'd always do the same thing. I'd go back to mild movement. I'd go back to breathing. I'd go back to continuing to develop my core. I made a difference every step, every movement, every day. I never gave up. I refused to give up. In my last fall, I had further damaged my back. And about 30 years later, after constantly moving, after constantly doing whatever I did, I remember waking up in the morning when I was in extreme pain, and I would swim for an hour. Go home, I'd be a better person. I'd feel better from the movement that I did. But it got to a point where I had to have surgery. And I was lucky enough to know a neurologist, a surgeon that was remarkable. And he ended up giving me a lumbar fusion. And I remember the words he said. About 4 days after recovery, he comes in and he goes, Sharon, I had to call another neurologist in here to just look at your back. There is no way you should have been moving. You were severed on both sides. It was remarkable what you did. And he said, I'm not going to send you to PT because I figure you'll do your own rehab, which I did. And that in itself, a lumbar fusion, is huge. I knew from the possibilities, and I knew from the fact that I was very determined in my body. This is the only vessel I have. I was determined in my mind how to make that change, and I was determined in my faith how to always take that next step and to never slow down. So here I am, less than 1,000 days of turning 70, and I determined that I'm going to be the best I can be. Aging is a privilege, and like everything else in life, you have the choice to do what you want to do with your body. If you tell people you can, and you walk through the analysis of what you have to recognize and what you have to change and what you have to evaluate, and you execute that, and you never give up, it will change you.